A few weeks ago, I had a tough choice to make, and when I made it, a few hundred commenters wrote,
"You chose poorly."
There was a firestorm in the comment section. The problem is I watched a viral speech that Anthony Chaffee gave called "Plants Are Trying to Kill You." What stopped me in my tracks is that Anthony based that line on the career of Professor Bruce Ames, whose career can be summarized with the line, "Plants are trying to save you." And Dr. Ames brought receipts. He published vast amounts of data showing that the lowest quartile of fruit and vegetable consumers had double the cancer risk of the upper quartile. Great scientists are my heroes, and Dr. Ames is considered one of the true greats, having received almost every award a scientist can receive short of a Nobel Prize. So my dilemma was, do I listen to an inner voice, which is telling me, just let it slide, Chris. One less thing on your list, and anything you say will be interpreted as tribal. But I was contending with other voices.
You have to say something, honey. He's on the cover of the supermarket tabloid with huge circulation making outrageous claims. He gives me Dr. Oz vibes, only worse.
So I bought a packet of these tabloids off eBay to see what so many Americans are reading. 1.6 million circulation and so many more impressions because they're face out at the newsstand. Dr. Stork says H2O melts fat, 8 pounds and 10 inches a week. And they have anti-aging tricks, drink beer to prevent Alzheimer's. I thought for sure Women's World must be misquoting Dr. Chaffee when he said he lost 23 pounds in 10 days while multiplying his caloric intake by 5. But
I lost 23 pounds just ditching vegetables and increasing the amount of feed. I quintupled my calories and lost 23 pounds. I lost 23 pounds in 10 days.
So I looked into Dr. Chaffee and couldn't get Paul Simon's famous lyrics out of my head.
It's every generation throws a hero up a pop chart.
Just 6 years ago, when he posted a photo sipping coconut water and maybe drinking a beer, he got 14 likes and one commenter who said, "I knew you loved coconut." He's handsome, well-built, well-spoken, played rugby, got an MD from the Royal College of Surgeons, volunteered among the Rohingya. I think he deserves all the credit in the world for those things. 6 years after that lonesome Instagram post, his social media accounts are on fire. He runs circles around me and people I admire like Gil Carvalho and Simon Hill. He speaks at conferences, offers a paid coaching program, blasts out emails, endorses products, all while identifying as a neurosurgeon. Maybe he'll be the next Andrew Huberman.
And it's the #1 health and fitness podcast in the world. Crushing it.
Some people posted I should man up and debate Dr. Chaffee. I'm afraid my social media presence is too small for him, but I did watch a debate between him and a popular vegan, Dr. Nagra. The result was Dr. Nagra's followers were sure he won the debate, partly because of his superior knowledge about studies. And Dr. Chaffee's followers were sure he won the debate, partly because he went back to compelling first principles.
Surely you're familiar with the Nurses' Health Study or Health Professionals Follow-Up Study. What are the inherent issues with that?
We shouldn't be looking at those studies. We should be going to first principles. What are we biologically designed to eat?
My opinion is the debate did require a lot of knowledge about scientific papers to fully understand. Which brings up the fascinating question, how did so many people come away from the debate so sure their guy won? After that debate, I had 3 questions. 1, what are Anthony's first principles? 2, what are the forces that cause one of your friends to believe one thing passionately and another friend the opposite thing just as passionately? And 3, what makes us choose the nutrition heroes we throw up the pop charts? The good news is none of those questions require much knowledge of scientific studies to answer. Let's start with first principles.
There was a major study that was done out of the University of Tel Aviv in Israel from Professor Miki Ben Dor. This showed that humans have been hyper-carnivorous, apex predators for at least 2 million years.
He's basing that on paleoanthropologist Miki Ben Dor, who has made the rounds on the carnivore channels.
The basic template is that we have to eat what we were evolved to eat.
I have his book. I think it's fair to say he is controversial. He's not a major voice in paleoanthropology, but he's not considered a kook either. Every paleoanthropologist does say eating meat did have a big influence on human evolution. But doesn't it feel wise to hear second opinions from more prominent, less controversial anthropologists?
I'm an archaeological scientist, and I study the health and dietary histories of ancient peoples using bone biochemistry and ancient DNA. And so if we take a step back and we say, well, what can we really learn about the Paleolithic diets around the world? There are some general observations we can make. One is that they are regionally variable. People who live in the Arctic have and always will eat something different than people who live in the tropics. They have different resources. So people who live in places where there are no plants tend to eat more animals, and people who live in places where there are plants tend to eat more plants.
My name is Peter Unger. I'm a paleoanthropologist. I study human evolution, and more specifically, I reconstruct the diets of our ancient ancestors. Our diets varied over time and space with shifting availabilities of different kinds of foods. And in fact, this is what allowed our ancestors to find something to eat no matter where they roamed. Whether it's up in the high Arctic, where nearly all of their food was marine mammals and fish, or down by the equator, where they could take 70% of their calories from sugary melons and starchy roots. In effect, our evolution has prepared us for a versatility that's allowed us to take over the world.
Even back to the earliest human ancestors, back to 6 or 7 million years ago, we probably had a very omnivorous diet, so eating plants and animals, eating things like fruit and leaves and berries, and probably small animals, maybe insects, lizards, eggs, all sorts of things, kind of anything we could get our hands on.
I'm an earth scientist by background, and one of the basic principles of earth science is the processes we see today are the very ones that shaped the earth in the past. And what we see today is that several species stand out in their ability to live almost everywhere because they can eat almost anything and stay alive. Humans, rats, and cockroaches, am I right?
What is that?
I don't really know.
You don't know, and you're eating it.
You know, if you can sort of muscle your way past the gag reflex, all kinds of food possibilities open up.
I hope I didn't offend any adorable rats or cockroaches by associating them with humans.
Wait, ew, its tail. Oh my God, its tail's going in my mouth.
We're so adaptable, most parents don't think twice about feeding their children soda and cotton candy, but we recoil at the thought of giving that to our pets. And I think more paleoanthropologists believe the advent of cooking was the biggest influence on human evolution. Here's Professor Alice Roberts, whose fantastic book on evolution is right behind me.
Cooking means that we get a lot more energy from our diet than we would do otherwise. Richard Wrangham's idea is that cooking provides us with almost the same kind of boost as people used to put forward for the man the hunter idea, that meat would be the kind of thing which gave us a lot more energy. I think it's a great theory. So now instead of the idea of man the hunter going off and catching meat, he's there, but perhaps he's only bringing back the occasional rabbit. What we've got are women bringing in tubers and this idea of cooking. And all this extra energy that cooking is giving us will presumably mean that we could support bigger families and all of that sort of thing. But perhaps it also gives us the energy to help a bit of us grow, because the other big thing that's happening is an expanding brain.
Remember when Anthony said we shouldn't be going by studies, we should go back to first principles. The thing is, his first principle is based on Miki Ben Dor's studies. You may dismiss the Harvard Women's Health Study, as Anthony did, because it's observational. But Miki Ben Dor's studies are also observational. But instead of having all the information the Women's Health Study has, like age at death and medical information, Miki has mainly scattered bone fragments and teeth. And instead of basing the first principle on respected career scientists who actually do physical studies, he's basing it on a former business executive, a minor voice in paleoanthropology, who got his PhD in archaeology at age 58 and whose research mainly comes from a computer with an internet connection. So I think Dr. Unger's point carries the day. We spread around the globe not because we're herbivores or carnivores, but because we can eat almost anything. Anthony's principle number 2 is plants are trying to kill us.
So this is the study from Professor Bruce Ames from Berkeley. This was published in 1989, and he showed that just the natural plants and vegetables contain 10,000 times more naturally occurring pesticides by weight than the industrial pesticides that we were using on them.
That's not actually a study by Bruce Ames. It's an article written by the staff of a pop science magazine that quoted Dr. Ames out of context. He has over 550 publications in the most respected journals for all to see. He testified to Congress about what his papers say. that the lowest quartile of fruit and vegetable consumers have double the risk of most cancers compared to people in the upper quartile. I mentioned that in my previous episode, and beef lovers descended on the episode en masse. It has 1,800 comments. But I couldn't find a single comment pushing back on Dr. Ames's claims, nor a single mention of cancer. Tragically, as I struggled to make sense of that, a wonderful friend lost his 3-year battle with cancer at 40, reminding Tony and I how devastating cancer can be. I don't know, maybe people are just tired of hearing about fruit and vegetables and know that even they are not a guarantee against cancer. So what about plant sources of the nation's obsession? Protein, like nuts and legumes. This is why I don't think it's a good idea to simply ignore studies like the Nurses' Health Study, as Anthony encouraged. Instead of betting our health on what we can infer from million-year-old fossil fragments, this study involved 50,000 modern humans in our modern environment with our modern foods, with modern blood and cognitive tests on people who live long enough to get diseases like Alzheimer's. We have very detailed and verified dietary records for them over 30 years. It's a massive effort to collect and analyze data like this. Here are their sources of animal protein. It includes fish, which is thought to be healthy. And here are their sources of plant protein. Not many nuts and legumes here, which are thought to be healthy. Lots of other categories look like they could be pretty unhealthy, like baked goods. And we know what most American bread is like. It takes me days of study to mostly understand a study like this, and I often have to interview the lead author to fill the gaps in my understanding, which I have done many times with other studies. But I promised you wouldn't need much science to understand Anthony's first principles. And we are in luck, because Simon Hill did a great job of explaining this study, which I'll link in the description. Here are the highlights.
Healthy aging was what's called a composite outcome, made up of 4 individual outcomes. Number 1, being free from 11 major chronic diseases. Number 2, having no impairment in memory. Number 3, no impairment in physical function. And number 4, being in good mental health. They also went a step further and did a substitution analysis, which looked at what happens when you replace 3% of calories from total protein, animal protein, dairy protein, or plant protein with other nutrients. The real story is what you see in forest plot D in this figure. Replacing 3% of energy from animal protein with plant protein improves someone's odds of healthy aging by 38%. And replacing 3% of energy from dairy protein with plant protein improves someone's odds of healthy aging by 26%.
The shocking thing about those numbers is they were for only substituting 3% of calories. We're not talking about having to go big or go home. And they'd probably be better if the plant protein was coming more from beans and nuts and less from baked goods. I'm in charge of the program for TEDx Boston's Longevity Day on October 1st this year, and I'm on the hunt for great speakers. Turns out there are great directories of longevity studies, and I've been chasing them all down. I get fascinated by studies I hadn't heard of, like the Kyoto Centenarian study, but it feels like their conclusions are always the same.
Kyoto Prefecture has ranked 4th for men and 3rd for women. It is famous for Kyotango Longevity Cohort Research. This is conducted by Kyoto Prefectural University of Medicine. So there are 3 factors that they discovered. One is a traditional diet is maintained, like seafood, high fiber diet. 2, young vascular age. This is mainly to do with high amount of physical activity. And then 3, community communication. They have many friends and social activities. They eat a lot of seaweed and beans.
From what I can tell, the pattern is the healthiest populations are usually located in mild climates where there are a variety of plants to eat year-round and often where there are fish. France is a pretty good example.
If you looked at the north, the Brittany, Normandy parts of France, they were really Northern Europeans that had very dairy-centric diets. And then the south of France had more Mediterranean-type diets. They were really on the Mediterranean. And across, though, just within France, there was also a 4-fold difference in heart disease rates, with the dairy animal-centric diet at the north having about 4 times higher risk of heart disease compared to the Mediterranean.
Here's another of Anthony's first principles.
If a diet is lacking in specific essential nutrients like B12, but there are more, then that cannot be our evolved biologically appropriate diet.
There is some very dangerous misinformation about this, and I'll touch on just some of it. It's absolutely correct that vegans must pay attention to B12, but it's also absolutely correct that omnivores and carnivores must pay attention to it too. There is an argument that in a less hygienic world, we got B12 from things like dirt, contamination with feces, etc. But we don't live in that world now. B12 is not in plants, except perhaps duckweed, which hardly anyone eats. Sucking on a B12 pill is dead easy and cheap. You gotta do it. The dangerous thing is believing that because you're not vegan, you're good. Estimates vary, but perhaps 20% of people over 60 are low in B12 no matter what they eat. That's because it's bound to animal protein and it takes an acid stomach to absorb it. And stomach acidity declines with age. The form in the pills is crystalline and you generally retain the ability to absorb that. For example, Sanjay Gupta is a neurosurgeon who wrote a great book about staying sharp. He's 54 and just went through a battery of cognitive tests. And he discovered that he was low in B12. Gotta check it. I made an episode about it. The second dangerous thing is believing beef is the perfect food and it contains all the nutrients you need. I know. I read the same comments you do reinforcing that notion, and I've read all of your comments on my channel. And I've read the amazing turnarounds people have experienced in their health on a carnivore diet, and I believe them. Here's the thing, I have an unnatural interest in diet trends past, and I have dozens of historical books about them. The biggest ones that kept coming around that were based on the perfect food were the milk diet miracle, the egg diet, fruitarian, raw vegetable, all meat, all white rice diet, and juice diets. They all produced amazing stories of weight loss and transformations in people's health for a while, maybe even 10 years or more, with a few tragic exceptions. What's conspicuously absent are populations who lived long on them, even though they've trended for centuries. Maybe mainstream anthropologists got it right when they observed that we evolved on diversity.
And they're going to be seasonally variable because plants seed and fruit at different times, herds migrate, and fish spawn on a seasonal cycle.
What's common among all diet trends which focus on a single superfood is how adherents form groups that focus on the positive stories and shut out the negative ones. A couple of emergency room docs asked me to raise the flag on one of the mishaps of the carnivore diet which doesn't make it into those positive groups. It's a very difficult thing to diagnose in the emergency room. Emergency room doc Siobhan makes really good episodes about difficult diagnoses, and here are clips from her episode about a carnivore named Tom who came into the emergency room experiencing anaphylactic shock.
Alpha-gal is a carbohydrate that's found in all mammals except humans and higher primates. So when Tom's immune system came in contact with alpha-gal, it identified it as foreign and kind of freaked out. And here's why I think you need to know about alpha-gal syndrome. At least 500,000 Americans are living with this condition and having allergic reactions to red meat. But that number is probably a lot higher because the condition is likely underdiagnosed. For a couple of reasons. There's a huge range of severity, from a stomach ache or itchy skin a few hours after eating, to a full-blown cardiac arrest like Tom experienced. Unlike most food allergies, where the reaction happens within minutes, alpha-gal reactions are delayed. They take 2 to 8 hours to develop. So patients and their healthcare providers may not make the connection to red meat. And unfortunately, there are many patients that carry a misdiagnosis, like irritable bowel syndrome or chronic diarrhea, before the proper diagnosis is made. Plus, the reactions can be unpredictable. A food that you might tolerate one day, you might react to the next day. Obviously, he cannot eat red meat. But he actually can have fish, seafood, and poultry because they don't contain alpha-gal.
The thing about single superfood diets is in the long run, you can eventually overdose on some nutrients and become deficient in others. For example, red meat has the highest concentration of a form of iron called Heme, which is associated with accelerated aging. Fish have much lower levels and plants have none. Heme is the most bioavailable form of iron and can generate high levels of ferritin in men and postmenopausal women. Ferritin is an indicator of iron levels. The Copenhagen Heart Study collected ferritin levels for 9,000 people who died at different ages. People with ferritin levels less than 200 died at a median age of 79. Between 200 and 400, they lived 3 years less. Between 400 and 600, it was 7 years less. And above 600, 24 years less. I am often shaken by the idea that beef has no nutrient deficiencies. For example, it has low levels of carotenoids. They are the dyes that protect plants from sunburn. For people like me who have fair freckled Scottish skin, a reddish mustache, and blue eyes, we really depend on absorbing those dyes to protect our skin and our eyes. Carotenoids from colorful fruit and veggies generally add an SPF factor of 2 to skin like mine, which means it takes twice as long to burn and slows aging of the skin. I made an episode about that. What about fiber? When I was a child living with my poverty-stricken mom, whom I adored, I didn't brush my teeth and we had no money for a dentist. The first time I saw one, he told me to start brushing. I tried, but it made my gums bleed, so I stopped. On my next visit, the dentist told me, "We have a paradox. You won't brush your teeth because they bleed, and they bleed because you won't brush your teeth." I think we have the same paradox with fiber. It takes a healthy microbiome to digest fiber, but we live in the age of antibiotics overuse, and foods like these Twinkies, which have been sitting on my counter for 3 years untouched by bacteria, mold, or ants, and which do no favors to our microbiome. And so we end up with microbiomes which can no longer break down some kinds of fiber. One of the biggest advances in nutrition over the last 15 years is learning that feeding our microbiomes a wide variety of fiber and fermented foods gets us a diverse microbiome that returns the favor.
Your gut is like a pharmacy. When the bacteria is feeding on these prebiotics, it's dispensing drug-like molecules that go into your blood and affect your mood, they affect your blood glucose control, they affect your lipids. When you have a disrupted microbiome and you lose that capacity, you're missing out on those rewards.
Thousands of carnivores have proven you can thrive for a number of years without fiber. The question is, for how many years? The dangerous thing is when some bacterial species disappear in our microbiome, they're not coming back. Not for you or your children if you're a mother, and that may impair your digestion and your children's digestion forever. I made an episode about that. Okay, maybe poop transplants from someone who didn't wreck their microbiome can bring back some bacterial species. I'm picking up tones of bifidobacteria, which is known to ferment fiber, boost immune response, and reduce inflammation. I know many of you have intolerances to plants, perhaps because of a wrecked microbiome, an allergy, or whatever. When that happens with animal foods, no one says they're intolerant to animals. They figure out if it's shellfish or dairy or whatever with an elimination diet. With plants, it could be nightshade vegetables, modern wheat, peanuts, or whatever. But I don't think that jumping to a conclusion that it's all plants is a recipe for longevity. My wish is for people to consult someone like Brooke Goldner or Will Bolsowitz before making a really consequential decision to eliminate all plants. There are many other nutrient deficiencies in beef like folate and polyphenols, but this episode is too long, so maybe I should return to first principles. I think every paleontologist, including Miki Ben Dor, agrees that we evolved eating a variety of wild animals and wild fish, including all the parts. Even my historical diet books say fattened, sedentary animals raised in fenced pastures or barns were not the natural diet of man, and not as healthy as eating wild animals.
Wild boar and wild sow. Reason teacheth us that it is far above tame pork or swine's flesh. First, because it feeds more purely. Secondly, because it hath not meat brought to hand, but gets it by travail, and hath choice of diet to feed whereon it liveth. Thirdly, it is not penned up, as commonly our swine.
Part 2. So how does someone like Anthony come to believe the very opposite of someone like Bruce Ames? That question got me rereading Carl Sagan's famous book, The Demon-Haunted World, Science as a Candle in the Dark. Sagan was contending with 1 million UFO sightings. Some people described actually boarding UFOs. Dr. Sagan couldn't say for sure there are no aliens, so how should he have answered? Neil deGrasse Tyson took a stab at that answer in our more modern world.
Why is it that our best images of these visiting aliens are fuzzy when we have 6 billion smartphones in the world?
How come we're not hearing about alien abductions anymore the way we used to?
Right. In the 70s, 60s, 70s, early 80s, alien abduction stories were common, where people would get brought onto this craft, get poked and prodded. Now, you don't want to discount someone's feelings or emotional encounter that they might have had, but I just need better evidence than your eyewitness testimony. Like eyewitness testimony, as high as that is in the court of law, where they say, I need a witness. In the court of science, it's like, no, show me the data. So that would be a camera. So today, if an alien starts walking toward you, pull out the camera and stream it. Alien abduction stories have gone basically to zero in modern times relative to back then.
Because of the phones.
The phones.
Right.
What I took away from Dr. Sagan's book is, 1, it's so very hard not to believe what you really want to believe. And 2, social proof is a very powerful thing. Are there signs that Anthony just really wants to believe?
No one likes Brussels sprouts, right? You know? You give an infant a piece of broccoli, they will hate you for it, you know? You give them a piece of bacon, you know, and their eyes light up.
What about seeing a pop science article that's only a 3-minute read and wanting to believe so hard you don't actually follow up and read what Bruce Ames actually wrote?
I have an Italian wife and she feeds me a wonderful Mediterranean diet. We eat lots of fish and veggies, and I love Italians cook veggies in wonderful ways with a little olive oil and garlic, and so I don't eat veggies with a meal. I feel deprived.
What about glomming onto the one paleoanthropologist who believes we evolved eating giant wild animals almost exclusively and ignoring other paleoanthropologists? I wanted to understand more if I could, so I ended up listening to Dan Ariely's book,
Misbelief: What Makes Rational People Believe Irrational Things. Chapter 1. How could that person believe that thing?
That is a riveting book. He described the risk factors we all have that entice us down the funnel of misbelief. One is stress. Maybe we have a scary condition that doctors haven't been able to diagnose. Could it be from a vaccine, pesticides, oxalates? The experts are not sure, but we find people who say they are sure and they have social proof to back it up. They accept us, they give us respect, even when our families are beginning to withdraw because they suspect we're starting to lose our minds. And so, according to Dan Ariely, the number one driver of our belief becomes social. Narcissism is a risk factor, and we probably all have some of that.
Stress and narcissism create a dangerous mix. Tend to your narcissists. Give them a little extra love, affirmation, or just give them a hug.
Oh, honey, can I just give you a hug? You look like you need one today.
So the people not sliding down the funnel of misbelief often inadvertently harden the beliefs of those who are. That's because presenting facts, which seem so persuasive to them, can come across as criticism. And the common reaction to facts we don't like is to double down on social proof, which is so persuasive. Women's World knows how powerful social proof is. For example, in their edition about the carb that cures cravings, aka the potato is a superfood diet, they put Patty Harding on the cover, who lost 100 pounds at age 69 and transformed her health. Yes, she's a real person who goes by the name of Potato Patty. The author of this 1906 book, The Royal Road to Health, had to contend with the war that was going on between vegetarians and carnivores in his day. He said that war had raged since the days of Pythagoras. Each side can point to exceptional instances of physical development under the different diets, and each can point to ill results that follow rigid adherence to one diet or the other. Remember how I said no commenters reacted to Bruce Ames or cancer after I pointed out what he actually said? Instead, they doubled down on social proof and on feeling attacked by me. But the biggest risk factor of all is trust. If we can be persuaded that we've been lied to by doctors and scientists, it's way more likely we'll go down the funnels of disbelief. Steve Jobs used to say, you can tell a lot about a person by the heroes they keep. I think you can predict a lot about what a person believes by who they trust. If you mostly trust scientists at institutions like Harvard and Stanford, you're likely to believe whole plants close to their natural state are healthy. And if you don't, understandably, anything goes. I say understandably because I have worked across many scientific fields. And if corporations and politicians have an incentive to discredit scientists in a certain field, they generally succeed among maybe half the population. And that amplifies the spiral of misbelief. For example, suppose you believe leading doctors and scientists are liars, as Anthony does.
The AHA, the American Heart Association, is a pack of lying somethings.
Understandably, you're not going to read studies from people you believe are liars, which stalls many well-intentioned debates because one person hasn't read the studies and the other has.
You're asking me to do something that I'm not prepared for, and so obviously that's not something that I can do in a well-reasoned way.
Part 3, how do we pick the people that we trust? By now you're thinking, well, that's easy. We pick people who tell us what we want to hear, that scientists got it all wrong, and who provide social proof. But there are darker things to talk about. Here's one.
Humans have always loved villains. Without them, the entire canon of our storytelling would be very dull indeed. A good villain helps us draw bright moral lines, create drama and tension, and find a satisfying resolution when evil is defeated.
I think this is a major tell. Making things up about leading scientists and doctors to cast them as villains is a very powerful way to become a star and send people down the funnel of misbelief.
When a person expresses moral outrage, they elevate their own status from that of a hater to that of a righteous crusader for justice and morality. When we see someone expressing themselves with moral outrage, it's a sign that they've gone quite deep into the funnel.
The most polarizing figure in all of nutrition is Ancel Keys, the man who popularized the Mediterranean diet. Scientists who have studied him think he was a giant, the best in the history of nutrition. I have studied him and the people who revile him for years, and there is a very sharp line that separates the two. All the people I have ever heard of who think he was great actually read what he wrote. I have never heard of one of his critics who actually read what he wrote, like this 1980 book still available from Harvard University Press. Since consumers have not read Ancel Keys' papers, a professional writer who understands the power of moral outrage could tell a consumer audience this.
Keys did a lot of, there's hardly a better word for it than kind of saying fudging the data. And he published it in obscure German-only journals. I had to go back to obscure places. He really didn't want this data to get out.
None of that is true, but morally, the most outrageous thing a scientist can do is fudge their data and try to hide it. The thing is, the currency of credible scientists is evidence. They don't deal in villains, moral outrage, and social proof. But many social media stars do, and that explains a lot about how they get big views. I know some people watching right now are angry that Ancel Keys cherry-picked countries to study to prove his hypothesis, another widely claimed moral outrage. I made a short episode about that, and I'm not aware of people who watched who still believe it. It's like claiming Bruce Ames said don't eat vegetables. So what is my takeaway to this episode? The funnel of misbelief reminds me of the path to type 2 diabetes. As we gain weight, eat poorly, and forget to exercise, our pancreas slowly shrivels up. If we catch it before it goes too far, it can regrow. If not, we're on insulin for life. The funnel of misbelief is like that. The further we go down the funnel, the less likely it is that we can ever come back. The hardest thing for me is how can we point out misinformation without it sounding like criticism and driving people further down the funnel? This is why I think it's so important to show real respect to people who believe different things than we do and stay friends with them. After all, haven't we all slid partly down funnels of misbelief? We all believe things that aren't true. So why did I make this episode when some people will view it as criticism, hardening their misbelief? It's not because I like doing episodes like this, that's for sure. It's because I will always be grateful for people who saved many of us from false beliefs before we got too far down the funnel of misbelief. Maybe I can return the favor for people who haven't gone too far down a funnel for which there may be no return. I wanted to end the episode here, but I sent it out for fact-checking as usual, and the fact-checkers came back and said you should have addressed Anthony Chaffee's background. The questions are everywhere, on my channel, Reddit, Instagram, etc. Some people think he's like the liver king who became a very rich viral star by claiming raw liver is the superfood that built his amazing body. He used all the masculine marketing tricks we men are suckers for. And then we found out he had an enormous helping of steroids to go with that liver, which he hadn't told us. Dr. Chaffee has a similar superfood diet and uses similar masculine marketing. I'm not aware of any other neurosurgeon who claims his diet cures Crohn's and IBS, or who appears on podcasts making similar claims on topics ranging from cancer to fertility. I can understand how that could propel you to social media and tabloid superstardom, but spending so much time on social media doesn't give me reputable neurosurgeon vibes. I did look into his background a bit and can understand the controversy. On his LinkedIn, he just lists medical doctor at some hospital. He has a resume online, but I don't see him listed where his resume says he works, even though they seem to list all the staff. His resume describes a very impressive rugby career, but Google is oddly silent about it. Maybe I'm just bad at internet search, but I don't recall it being this difficult to verify the background of any other doctor. This definitely made me feel like a creeper, but it seemed important, so I wrote to the colleges he listed, such as Duke School of Medicine. That looks impressive on his resume. Duke responded that he enrolled in a 4-week course there as a visiting student, but he was not enrolled in a degree program. So, Anthony, if you're watching, I have an idea. People love the behind-the-scenes videos like Siobhan does.
The emergency doctors have asked me to see 2 patients. The first has shortness of breath, and the other is an elderly patient who's had multiple falls at home.
Neurosurgery is fascinating, and you could put all this controversy to rest with an episode about your residency and a behind-the-scenes video of your career. I would love to be the first to say, I wondered about your background, but you clarified it, and it checks out.